I'm from Hokkaido, Japan. I like to watch the cherry blossoms fall and wreak terrible vengeance upon my enemies with my samurai sword, otherwise called a katana.
Hello and welcome to the QUACKCAST. This is QUACKCAST number 507. I am Ozone Ocean, and with me is Baines, Tarts, and Pitt. Hello.
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 So this week we're going to be talking about names. We also did a QUACKCAST 407, I believe, about names. But this time we're taking a different approach because Tarts has... approached it very intellectually and cleverly and come up with some better methodology for it. So we're going to use the benefit of hindsight and experience to revisit this topic in a smarter way. But
oh my God, it's going to end.
It always
this is
does.
Raising experts.
Oh, we're just going to have a fun QUACKCAST really and just sort of talk crap. But yeah,
Guys, don't expect intelligence. No?
yeah.
Like what?
Well, we're just going to fart into the microphone. But before we do that, I've got to bring up the featured comic. I featured Adulting Amy this week, so take it away, me, with Adulting Amy. Hello, I'm Ozone Ocean, and my feature for the week was Adulting Amy. Growing up is hard. It's funny when you don't realize that's what you are, though. Suddenly, you're like, oh, I'm not a kid anymore. WTF? When did this happen? That's sort of what Amy is going through. This is a slice of life comic about a young professional woman navigating the tricky shores of adulthood and seeing where it takes her. We get to see her problems with dating and the trials and tribulations of living with a very naughty cat who's hell-bent on making everything about him, all as all good cats should. The art is brightly digitally coloured and very happy and friendly looking. This is a funny and relaxing read. The comic is by L.C. Stein and it's rated E. So have a look. Yeah, nice, happy, colourful artwork and friendly, relatable story stuff. So it's really, really cool. Okay, so enjoy Adulting Amy. And that was our featured comic. Adulting Amy, which is a lovely comic by L.C. Stein. Originally she had a different name, and she asked me to change it to like something like L.C. Stein, and I thought, yeah, so L.C. Stein, and now it sounds like, those old author names. Everyone used to be called like R something, or like J.R. Tolkien, C.S. Lewis back in the day. Everyone had that. No one was called their full name. Everyone had like their initials and their last name. So that's pretty cool. Very retro, proper author kind of thing. We should all be as clever rather than calling ourselves silly names like Ozone Ocean and whatever else. So yeah, that's was Adulting Amy. Next up, we have the featured music. Gumwalls has given us a pretty cool theme, and Gumwalls' theme this week is Times Like This. Music for a time traveler. The regular repeating, almost clock-like rhythm of the electronic synth theme is overlaid with lyrical twiddling chaos of an electric guitar playing in the very high tones, soaring above and shooting around at its leisure. So take it away, Gumwallis, with Times Like This. that was our featured music, which was Times Like This. Right then, so names. Names are a pretty cool thing. Coming up with names is very hard, but Tance has come up with some various techniques that allow you to do it and make it a bit easier. So we'll have a chat about that and also just go off topic and sort of be fun about it. So anyway, Tance, your naming conventions, like you've mentioned in your excellent news post from Friday, which you had to fill in for Emma Claire because she had a family emergency, and your second news post from Saturday, you've given us all sorts of things like etymology, which is really cool. Names kind of have, different parts to their meanings, which is, something to be aware of. Names just aren't a name in itself. Names can mean all sorts of stuff, like your Victoria example, which is really cool. I mean, Victoria doesn't just mean a name. You're not just, you could be referencing Queen Victoria. You could be representing the Victorian age. You could represent victory in battle. So there's all those different things sort of wrapped up in one name. Or you could just have a very old-fashioned character.
Yeah, or you could have like a bit of irony in the sense that the character named Victoria is the only one that keeps losing for some reason, or whatever it is that they are trying to do.
That's a good point.
You don't actually need to play it straight, but you could have also the original name be very bombastic and glorious sounding, like Arthur or whatever, and the person actually answers to a nickname that is completely toned down, and that could also be significant. Like they might not be called Victoria, but they might be called Riri or Vicky, or Vicky is not a toned down name, but it's more everyday. But Riri is almost like playfully, rolling, like the cat that rolls over for belly rubs, sort of thing. It depends. It depends, like what name is given to a character and how the character handles their own name can also indicate parts of their personality or what they think and so on.
Definitely. Yeah. So I like your thing, Ace Goodheart, and I've got a character called. What's that?
That's an actual character from an anime. That's his name.
Well, I've got a character called Ace Kincaid, and that was an ironic name in that, like I've talked about it before, but he was named after a famous American adventurer who's meant to have discovered this bloody hidden city in the Grand Canyon, and his name is something G.E. Kincaid, so he's named after him. So my idea was that this an American blowhard bullshit artist styling himself as a hero, and what better name to be called than Ace Kincaid? And I thought, my God, that's such a cool name. And so I created the heroic kind of, well, seemingly heroic character, but he's not really heroic at all. He's a character who's meant to look heroic and not be heroic. So yeah, your example of irony, Aaron, an overblown kind of name. So yeah, it fits. So yeah, that's my example of that kind of thing. What about you guys with your names? I mean, Baines, what's TK?
Well, I probably talked about it on the last podcast a couple of years ago, but I put a lot of time into naming characters. Like with all of those characters in my comic, I had long lists over the course of months. I would occasionally like write long lists of names and look at them all and mix and match. And here and there, I settled on a name and then changed it later. And then you have to put them all together and make sure there's enough variety between the names and all that stuff. TK is the only one that I think he had a different name originally, but it just came to me, it just kind of popped into my head at one point, and it was unique. And I had an idea that they stand for something, and that would be revealed later. It still hasn't been revealed in the comic all these years later yet. But I thought, okay, if I do, like, T will stand for this, K will stand for this. We'll see if that holds. But I thought, that's just unusual. And yeah, it mostly, like, the idea of initials just popped into my head, and I just, kind of that one. I'm not really sure where it came from, but I played with it a little bit. But yeah, it kind of just popped into my mind, and I liked it, and it seemed to suit him. And with all of the other characters too, like after all that work, it's like, okay, that name fits. Like I look at that character, I think of that character, and that works. Although I love the ironic name idea. Wow, do I ever shut up? That's the question. That's the other question. The idea of the ironic names, I haven't really done that. It's just like, okay, that fits that character, that fits. Yeah, so that's the long-winded answer.
So can we decide what his name stands for?
Sure.
Team Killer. That's a popular game thing.
He would love that. Yeah.
Team Killer. They're bastards.
Kisser?
What was that, Pitt?
So what about Team Kisser?
Oh, he might enjoy that one too.
That's interesting. Tit Kisser?
Guesses. That's a little...
I didn't say that. That wasn't me. Tiger something. There's not many things that stand for K. K. I mean, K is... What words are starting with K? Kill, kiss, king, Tiger King. He's the Tiger King. Oh my god.
The chat just said, the chat disappeared. Theodore Kevin Tans just typed.
Oh.
That's funny. But I was thinking two names, like two proper names. Like his first name is blank, his middle name is blank, and he changed it to TK.
All right. Well, that makes sense.
You never trust a person with two first names.
That's what they say. Oddly enough, I do have two first names in real life.
Yeah, me too.
Really?
No, but I mean, like where your surname can be qualified.
Yeah.
As a common first name.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I've figured
Actually, so do you, Oz. You've got two first names.
Yeah, very Christian. Christian kind of name.
We all have two first names. It's like that's how we oscillated and gravitated to this QUACKCAST. It's all for people with two names.
Well, except Pitt. He doesn't really.
He does.
Yeah.
No, that's not a first name.
No, you're thinking of middle names, aren't you? I'm talking about if somebody has a surname, they can also like my name.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
My real name. But yeah, so you get it. But yeah, so.
Okay, then. Yes, okay.
Yeah.
I was
Peter David.
There you go.
Example.
Which is a great name. Peter David.
He's a cool name.
Yeah.
Right.
John Paul.
Anyway, that was a conversation.
Yeah, contemplating the two names.
Well, no, I was trying to think. Like, I had an art teacher once, a painting lecturer, and his full name was John Paul. So his last name was Paul. But everyone always called him by his full name, Jean Paul, because it sounds like a French name, which is like, you know, Jean-Paul Sartre or something like that. So the poor guy was always called by his full name no matter what, because it sounded like that, yeah. So that would be freaking annoying. Like, you know, you don't want that. Yeah, so yeah, the two first names. Anyway, what were we bloody talking about? Etymology. Okay, so we got etymology. Historicity. Okay, so this is a great word. Historicity matters. So, yeah, social ranking stuff. What's that, Tams?
No, I said it matters to a point because there is this, whenever we post, or at least it happens to me whenever I write certain pointers or guidelines for things, some people feel that these are the rules. If you don't follow these rules, you suck. So yeah, historicity will help you. Let's put it that way. That's the only thing. Okay.
Yeah. So like names that fit within their world at the time. So it's important to realize that stuff. Like if you're giving your character names. Oh, finally I got the bloody chat window up so I can actually read what people are saying. All these people kept chatting in the little chat window and it kept on disappearing. And now I can see it. Yeah, so if you give people names that don't fit within the era, then it's a bit weird. So if you're going back to, you know, the medieval era and you call your knight Sir Kevin, it sounds freaking wrong because there was no such name as Kevin in the medieval era. So you've got to be aware of that stuff.
Sir Bob would be better.
Sir Bob.
On the flip side, if you go too if you hit the nail too hard on the head with it and make him like Sir Lion, Braveheart, Great Warrior, it's gonna be too much. If I see a character with that name who has that sort of job description, I actually expect him to have a heel turn and not be so great. So, I mean, like being too on the head with it. I can't remember what that phrase is. Being too, hitting the nail too hard on the head with it, whatever.
On the head or whatever. Yeah.
Can kind of backlash at you too if you go too hard into the wind with it. So
yeah.
It's just like so one-dimensional, right? Like it's just one thing. It's just kind of dull. Like his name is, you know.
Yeah, like here's your hero. This is your hero. I hope you like. This is your hero. Like I don't know.
Unless there's another, like you said, unless there's a heel turn or a hidden side, then it's just kind of it's very bland. It's like super cartoon.
Sort of like Prince Charming in that was actually named Charming in Shrek.
Right. Yeah.
It works for a simple audience. So if you're doing it as a kids film, like Prince Charming from Sleeping Beauty, I think that's what the character's name is. Is it? No, it's from Cinderella.
Yeah.
And he's just a type. He's just a stock.
Wait. I think Cinderella's prince is called Florian, actually.
Oh, well.
I am not joking. I think he's called Florian.
Oh, Snow White? Maybe.
Yeah.
One of those Disney interpretations of the
one of those, like the first one of the 2 or 3 first princes that usually don't have a name. They do have names, that nobody ever calls them by their name, which is not actually all that wrong, because usually royalty wasn't called by their name, but like by their title, or even like just your grace or your majesty or your whatever. And the name was like a personal trinket, I guess. So,
The name's different. Like, that's a good point. Like, someone mentioned that Donald Trump Jr. like in some Facebook post, and I said, why is it like such? This is like a particularly American tradition. Like, you have people called like I don't know, James T something the third. I mean, we know this came from Europe and royal families and stuff like that, but that sort of died out. Now this is like in the 20th and 21st century, you have a lot of usually men in America with these like, you know, the third and the fourth or junior or senior or whatever, and it became like a thing. And it's particularly a US thing. But when you go back and look in history of like in the like Europe for the royals and stuff, like when someone was called, you know, something like Charles II or Charles I or whatever, normally that wasn't their real name. That was just the name they picked to be called when they acceded to royalty, because, you know, they wanted to have a homage to a previous, you know, like a dynasty or whatever, and they wanted to continue it. They weren't necessarily called that with their name, or they'd like, you know, be Lord something rather the fifth or the third. But this was something I think they chose to be called. I could be wrong there, but I think that's not necessarily always, you know, their birth name. It's like it's what they want to be called as a king, I think. Pretty sure.
I'm not sure, so maybe. I do know that there are certain names that almost become titles, like Augustus, and especially in Asia, the emperors or kings, like in old Korea, Joseon style kings, or China, you do have certain names that are standard for the kings while they are alive, and then they change the names when they die, and they get a different name because the king never dies. So, yeah, there's also that.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, so historicity. Vinny, I know Tance, your names are very you've got a good awareness of historicity, but but none of our other, my comic is sort of set in the past and sort of an alternative 1920s. I didn't really have to worry about historicity too much because, you know, it's alternative, so I can do what I want. And so Baines and Pitt, Pitt, you've got a comic set in the past now too, with the inhabitants. So you had to pick names that fit.
Oh fuck! Well, something I kind of was struggling with in my mind for a little bit. Not struggling too much because I think I was kind of set on the names from the get go, but I wasn't sure. Okay, so my main character, his name is Helmut. That's a German name. Thing is, I wanted the comic, at least originally, to take place more in like the old British Isles. And so I kind of did some acrobatics in my head where I thought, like, well, you know, eventually, you know, we had the Anglo-Saxons and stuff. You know, maybe German names can definitely weave in there too. I don't know how old of the name Helmut is. If I came up with it, I didn't come up with the name. Somebody else did a long, long time ago. But I took a shine to it when I was actually working on my German minor. And it just sounded like such a cool name, Hell and Mutt, right? Like, oh, well, this is so badass. And And so I started naming a bunch of RPG characters after it and stuff, and always give them nice butts, so you like what you're looking at and stuff. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. So I latched onto that name, and eventually used it for this character. There's going to be another character that shows up soon, oddly enough, named Florian. And Florian is more of a Latin name, I think, right? Like, I imagine, to me, I haven't looked it up, but to me it sounds like it more comes from like Rome or something. Which also isn't completely out of whack. At one time, the British Isles were under command of Rome.
They were.
So that's not. But so I was trying to kind of reconcile in my head how these names could be for these characters in the same kind of area, and now I'm not so sure that it is in the British Isles. It might be more around like North France or something like that. So I'm going to keep it pretty ambiguous where this place actually is, which sucks. It is a made up place. And which is why I was kind of reluctant to go that much into talking about it here. But that also goes into naming the place, right? So once I put a name on it, that also kind of gives it a flavor for where it is. So I'm kind of hedging on Griswold kind of continues to be a name that I like for where they live. And that would still apply for either being on the British Isles or on the mainland in northern France. So I guess there's no big rhyme or reason to the names I've chosen. I'm just kind of squishing it together and making it work, because at the same time, the Crusades are going to come into play. So then that also gives me a time span for when it is. So, which is the reason why I don't want to get too specific where it's taking place, because then that gives it an already made history that I don't feel like adhering to. But anyway, so that's why I have to make up the name, and that's what you're getting. So don't complain at me with your bullshit. I don't care. I don't think anyone's really going to complain anyway, unless they're really bored. But
yeah.
The actually people.
That's another thing. Going for the one thing that people might forget if they really go hard on the whole historicity thing is that the fact that historically you have a very specific trend doesn't mean that there were no exceptions or no derivatives that were still historical in a sense. The point of historicity in names is that it has to just not feel like too much of a sore thumb. Let's say, like we are in Northern Europe, for example, in medieval times, and we have a Japanese name from out of nowhere, and we don't even take some time to explain how this Japanese fellow appeared in Northern Europe at that time. Like, just mention the Silk Road or something, dude, like, please. The idea is that, or for example, you have a Caucasian having a Japanese name in that era. That would be extremely weird. And it's not that you cannot do it, it's just that you have to at least give it some background.
Context.
That would, yes, exactly. That would make it plausible. The thing that we you're going for is plausibility, not you're not going to write an archaeological manuscript, and nobody's asking for that. So that's the basic thing. Especially if you go for fantasy, you have basically free reign to decide what your historicity is and how the name is developed during the history of your land.
Yeah.
So that will be the only thing you have to consider. You have to decide what the historicity of your land is and how the names developed, and just keep to that. You don't need to make, all the names have to be from like a 2nd century AD, because that's the high fantasy technology that I'm going to use and the style. That's not necessary. The thing that you need to do is just to decide on your consistency. That's the key, the consistency element.
Yeah, go with the Tolkien thing, where he's given characters' names based on his own language that he developed for his elves, but his dwarves have names that are based on Anglo-Saxon sort of naming conventions. Thorin's son and all that kind of stuff. He chose to give them Anglo-Saxon Norse kind of theme, and that's what he went with, and he was consistent with it. And his elves had their consistent invented names, and it works, and it gained so much traction that people still use that for elves and dwarves today even. So it works. So yeah, it's an excellent little convention.
Exactly. The thing is, sorry, 1 second.
Tance has gone and smoke bombed off.
Came back with a tumbler of some kind of booze.
That's what the ninjas do.
I was offered booze, so I took it. So anyway, what I was going to say is that, for example, and I want to bring just an example from my fantasy world in the art of veiling. They all seem to have like a technology that would be more or less ranging from let's say around 1100 AD to almost perhaps around 1300. More or less, if you go the complete Da Vinci fever dream trajectory. But the names that I have picked don't come from the era. They come from what I wanted the feel of the culture to be when you hear the names from the different realms. So the the elves have names that sound very Judo-Latin, in a sense, because they are the ones that are the most dogmatic in their approach to many things. They are extremely stratified, and they have a very rigid caste system, and they also have lots of like their structure is very dogmatic. The ones that rule are the religious leaders, and so on and so forth. So that's the one. And then the other, the human realm, has very Greek sounding names without being completely Greek, but they have the sound that would be Greek. Excuse the stray cat that is on him, if you hear it. And the dragon people are the ones that sound very militaristic in their names, and very much Like they have only sibling names and not second names because they are very much a society that revolves around community and not individualism. So that's the approach to their names as well. And they sound the names have a few syllables and they are very much, they are less floral, let's say, than the other names. They don't have any historicity except the fact that they are consistent to the historicity of the fantasy history I have concocted for them. That's the only consistency that they have. So.
Okay. All right, so making names pronounceable. See, this is a very important aspect of it. How many times have you read a fantasy novel or a sci-fi and the freaking character's got a name full of consonants and you think, I'm just gonna call him like Dave. They have a name that you cannot pronounce in your head, so you just give them like a weird version of a name, and you never know how it's meant to be pronounced because this freaking author is like an arrogant piece of shit. He gives the character a name that no one can work out how it's meant to be said.
You've been really hurt by this.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm sure everybody has to some degree. You know, you read like a fantasy book and there's a character just with a freaking name that you just, how are you meant to say it? So you do your own thing because there's no other way to do it. Like, I can't think of a specific example, but I'm sure there's hundreds. Like, but I'm sure you guys have experienced that. Like, you read something and a character.
I'm illiterate, so.
Hey?
I said I would tell you one, but I'm illiterate, so I don't know.
Of course.
I don't read nearly enough either, but I've definitely run into it where I don't know how to pronounce a name. It never would have occurred to me when I was a more voracious reader, unless I wanted to tell someone about the book. Like, as long as I could identify the character, when I saw the name, I knew who the character was, and it wasn't confusing on that level. It wouldn't bother me, like, unless for some reason I wanted to tell someone about the character, or I had to for school or something, like to identify the character. Then it would be frustrating.
Yeah. I mean,
like apostrophes in places. Whatever.
That's why TJ's real name is Drunkduck. No.
I'm so glad I shortened it.
But yeah, you're reading away and you come up with one of these names, and I don't know how other people read, but for me, there's a mental reading out of what I read. You know, it's like I've got a voice in my head, and when I stumble across a name that I can't pronounce, then I mentally stumble as well each time until my brain can work out a way to handle it.
Yeah.
And some things, I mean, some things you're just naturally not going to pronounce in your head correctly. I mean, that's a whole different thing, you know, if the name's from a culture you're not familiar with or something. But then at least a lot of times in your head, you can still figure out a way to make it something that you can remember and sound out. There are some passes on that, but if you're making a name, I mean, make whatever fucking name you want. If you want to put a whole bunch of hyphens and stuff like that in it, it's your character. Go do what you want. But it can get kind of frustrating to try to read that character's name and not really be able to pronounce it.
Do it, but we'll hate you for it.
Bow to us and our literacy needs.
I mean, we do say like, oh, we come up with rules, but feel free to break them and do your own thing. But there's a good reason why there are some conventions, because you will, if you go against them, you'll alienate readers, and they'll not like your stuff as much or find difficulty. It's like, like one of a good rule for a comic on Drunkduck is not to give yourself a header image that is so huge that people have to keep on scrolling down each time to look at the comic. And you can break that rule and, do it anyway, but it means you're less likely to have readers. So think about it.
Another.
Hey?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it can just be I'll just say it can be another block to stop potential people from reading your comic.
Exactly. Thank God for the captions. I can actually read what you said. So yeah. But yeah. So there's that. All right. So the next thing that Tance came up with was don't give similar names. So like a whole bunch of characters called Pete and Pat and Paul and Patricia and Pauline
Poot.
and Poot, Pooh. And that's a good point. I mean, I've seen a lot of like anime, especially, and read a lot of stories and stuff like that. And when characters have names too similar, you get the characters confused. You get them mixed up because then their names are too similar. You can do it deliberately, like have two Paulines or something like that, and that could be like a story thing or part of the joke or whatever, and that's great. But if you're just doing it without thinking, then that causes confusion. And actually that caused a lot of confusion for me in Tolkien, because he's got like Sauron and Saruman, and to this day I still get confused by that.
So do I.
Actually, that is a rule I have broken in my fantasy one, but I did it on purpose, and I did it for a purpose that I never actually managed to include yet in the story. So I have two brothers. One is the father of the main character of the girl, and the other one is the uncle, obviously. And their names are Aaron and Aaron, which is extreme. You can't make them more similar than that. But there's a reason for it, because the firstborn, who was Aaron, is the one that got the firstborn name of the family, because every family has certain names that are reserved, let's say, for firstborn, secondborn, and so on. But the father hated the first son. He didn't like him at all. And he wished that he was not the firstborn. So he gave the secondborn, who is, the one that is supposed to get a completely different style of name.
Yeah.
He gave one that sounds very similar.
So there's a reason for it.
Yes, and treated him as the firstborn, pushing aside the firstborn. So that's why. That's why it's happening.
Well, I mean, there's a good example. I've got a fantastic freaking example of why you shouldn't use similar names. One of my really good friends, he's called Milan, which is a pretty common name in Serbia. And his wife is called Milena, but her sister is called Milena. So these are, like, for a start, like, that's pretty confusing. So his name is very similar to his wife's name, but his wife, her name is very similar to her sister's name. And you'd think, well, you're just being like Anglo-centric because, they're Serbian, so maybe that's not confusing for them. But no, you would be wrong, Mr. Wanker, because that is just as confusing for them. Because when he got married to his wife, the guy, the priest or whatever, put his sister-in-law's name on the marriage certificate. So he got married to the wrong woman. And this wasn't just like a simple factor of, oh, sorry, I made a mistake, I'll have to rub it out. He had to get divorced and then married the right woman. He had to get the marriage annulled and then get married again because of this idiot putting the wrong name on there. So yeah, confusing names can have real world consequences, I'm afraid.
That's right, writers. So be careful. You think it's a joke? You can end up married to the wrong person if you do this.
Exactly. I did not make that up. That is true. That is
It's wild.
real world example.
It sounds like a sitcom.
It does.
Yeah,
It's fantastic. I just can't stop laughing every time I see his wife.
the one piece of advice I would have for anyone that decides to use similar names, because as I said, none of this is written in stone and you can do whatever you want. But if you do decide to use similar names, you have to make the characters extremely distinct and have them within a context that that justifies it. Have them use their names a lot so that people just remember them by repetition. Like, for example, for my brothers that are very similarly named, they fight all the time and they constantly shout out each other's name with colorful descriptives accompanying. So it is, I'm hoping at least, I haven't gotten any complaints that I can't tell them apart or anything. But I'm hoping that this is enough for people to remember who is Aaron and who is Aaron, even though they are very similar. But I make it a point to, first of all, make them extremely distinctively different. The way they look, the way they talk is completely different. The way they react to things is very different. And they very distinctly are together in scenes where it's impossible to mix who is who, even though the name is similar. So try to do that if you choose to, have similar names for any.
Exactly, have a reason for it. I came up, I just thought of another example of a situation where characters had, real human beings had the same name. I don't know whether I've talked about this before, but there's the famous writer Evelyn Waugh, fantastic British writer, wrote about the Second World War and his experiences and all sorts of other things. But his first wife was also called Evelyn, and when they married, she took his last name, and they were both called Evelyn Waugh. So, yeah. And they called themselves he Evelyn and she Evelyn to tell them apart. So you can use that, you can use that kind of way of doing stuff, because this stuff does happen in reality and people have to work out ways around it.
Both of my nephews are dating two different girls named Hannah, and I feel really bad sometimes that we just group them together and call them the Hannahs.
Yeah.
People.
Well, there was a movie called The Heathers.
Mm-hmm.
Was
Yeah.
it?
Yeah. Oh yeah, it was really good. The Heathers were, from what I remember, it was like they're all like the popular girls, right? And they start getting murdered.
Yeah,
and they're all called
movie.
Heather. Sorry,
Yeah.
Tance, what were you saying?
Oh, I was going to say that I remember in my elementary school we had like two Georges and three Marias in the class. So they George 1, George 2, Maria 1, Maria 2. So that's how. And thankfully I was not Maria 4 because I also had Tanya as a name, so I was Tanya. Which was fortunate because back then there was a trend of your name is not a real name. Maria is the real name. That's the name that is actually a name. That the other one is not.
Tell you is that one of her middle names is Maria.
Yes.
Very
Yes.
Christian.
My middle name is extremely Christian.
One of the worst things you can do using that kind of thing, like, you know, Maria 1, Maria 2, is like using a physical descriptor for someone as their thing. So like Fat Kevin or Black Kevin. So these kind of things would have been fine back, say, if you're setting your thing in the 90s or the 80s, but you don't do that now. That's bad. So you don't.
And it would be bad back then as well. I mean,
yeah, but it was accepted then. So I mean, if you're setting your story back then, that would be an accurate depiction. You know, even though it wouldn't be pleasant. No one wants to be called, you know, like a pejorative. That's look at that. That's cute, Demos.
Yes. He's going to inspect what there is on the table and if it is any.
I love that nobody can see what we're talking about. Whenever a cat enters the picture, we just completely fly off the rail.
There is a cat being cute. That's all you have to know. Yeah, so be careful with names that are similar, and don't do the pejorative descriptions like, you know, fat, short, you know, skin color, racial differences, and all that kind of thing. That's, I suppose that all goes without saying, really. But, you know, that was a thing at one time in the past.
Dumb Baines, they used to call me. We had a couple of Baineses in there.
You know, that could be something you can use for your character's background, because if, for example, the way that they were distinguished from other people named the same way annoyed them, or it was hurtful, or it could have been something that they liked. It could have, you know, informed who they are in the current situation that you are presenting the character. So that can also be something.
That's true. Yeah. Ugly Betty. Wasn't that a TV show?
Yeah, well, she had like the braces and stuff.
Oh, I never saw that. The only thing I've seen with that woman is Cloud 9, which is a TV show about a supermarket where she manages it. So yeah. Anyway, that was a weird kind of little sidetrack. But we're sort of over time now, so we could wrap this up, I suppose. We had an interesting talk about names.
We could do another episode next time on, if we wanted to, on naming places, and then the suffix, prefix, suffix thing. We didn't really cover, and then totally invented like names and concepts and stuff like that. I have a little exercise on that.
Yeah. Okay. That would be awesome. Yeah, I'd like to hear about names, whether you steal them from history, which is what a lot of people do, or invent them from whole cloth, or how do you approach it? All right, so we'll talk about that next time. Goodbye, everyone. Bye.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Ciao.
A little bit this time.